This is Leon Audiobooks recording. My Life in Crime by John Kiriamiti. The late 1960s and early 70s may be remembered as the years of the great bank and other armed robberies in Kenya. This is the true story of one of the participants. This is the true story in one of the participants in some of those robberies, John Kiriamiti. In raw and candid language, he tells the story of how he dropped out of secondary school when he was only 15 years old and for a time became a novice pickpocket before graduating into crimes like car breaking and ultimately into violent robbery. This spellbinding story takes the reader into the underworld of crime, and it depicts graphically the criminal's struggle for survival against the force of law. John Kiriamiti was imprisoned on 6th January 1971 after being convicted. Before my life in crime, I never believed that a man or a group of people could sit together and conspire to rob, blackmail, kidnap, murder, or commit other acts of felony. But now I know. I'm about 30 as I write this book. I was born on 14th February 1950 and I was imprisoned on the 6th January 1971. So 8 of those years have been wasted in prison. I still have other years ahead of me. The judge who sentenced me knew exactly what he was doing. I always think in his life he had never heard of the word mercy, and if he had, he did not care what the hell it meant. I was born to a relatively well-to-do family. My father, Albert Kiriamiti, and my mother, Anne Wanjiru, were teachers, and therefore in my youth, I was well provided for. I completed my primary education in Twitter School. Twitter School is in Murang'a, about 15 miles from the town. In the lower primary, my mother was one of the teachers. I'll say I never enjoyed it because she used to beat me so hard that I often thought of escaping from school. As a mother, she was very sweet, but I never brought myself to believe that she was the same person when we went to school. When I went to the upper primary, I was glad to know that I would no longer be in her class. In 1963, I had passed my KAPE. I went to St. Mary's Secondary School in Murang'a town. I never liked the school, and before the end of my first year, I applied for a place at the new Nairobi High School, later renamed St. Mark's High School. I did not care what kind of school it was. All I wanted was to be in Nairobi. If only I knew Nairobi would turn me into a helpless person, I would have hated the look of it for good, as I now do. My brother Sammy, who had caught up with me in primary school, was also in Nairobi, at the Prince of Wales School. He was a boarder, but I was a day student. So mother took me to stay with her brother in Bahati. After 2 years in secondary school, I did my KJSE and got good results. I did not want to go back to school, but since I did not have any other thing to do, I was forced by circumstances to go back. In 1965, before the end of the third year, I was expelled from school for taking part in a strike. I was the ringleader, and so I was expelled with my followers. I never reported this matter to parents, since I needed the money they gave me for school fees and the daily bus fare I got from my uncle. I would therefore wake up early as usual, take my bag and bus fare. I would go to town. Sometimes I was given money to eat out, and sometimes I would go home for lunch. It would have worked out all right, or so I thought, if my brother Sammy had not interfered. I think he became jealous of the fact that I was fitting myself better in with my school fees. I've told you of the part of my uncle since I always think that it was the cause of all my trouble. I was then used to town life, going from this nightclub to the other. I was sure there was nothing better in life except maybe the movies. I do not know even today how my brother came to know about all this, but he knew. He wrote home and informed my parents without my knowledge. They must have written to my uncle to tell him they would come. So as I came to work out later, he knew they were coming. My aunt was not aware, for she would have told me since we were on very good terms. She arrived a week before my parents. One bright Saturday morning, my uncle told me not to go out to town. He said he would come back soon and wanted a word with me. I should have guessed then, but I didn't. At about 12, my mother arrived, and at 4 o'clock, my father arrived with my brother Sammy. I was not surprised to see them, for they used to make such visits at least once every month. In the evening, when we had all taken supper, my father started. We were all seated around the table discussing one thing or the other. He said, "How are you doing in school, young boys?" I said I was doing well. Brother Sammy said he was doing well too. "You look very bright these days, Jack. Very smart too. Seems as if your uncle spares you a lot of pocket money." I did not answer him. Neither did the phrase surprise me, as it had been said to me several times since I left school. After a short silence, he turned to me again. I did not want to meet his eyes for if I did so, I would not be able to talk myself out of his many tricks. "Jack, I don't see why we should beat around the bush. I know as well as you do that you are no longer in school. For almost 1 year, you have cheated me of a handful of money intended for your school fees. Anyway, I will forget about that. But for your foolish tricks, I have come to a brick wall. Now tell me, why did you leave school?" "I was expelled," I said. I knew the game was up. I knew too that he had not come there to persuade me to go back to school, but to take me home back to the reserve, a place I had come to hate. "Why were you expelled?" he asked. "They say that I had engineered a strike because we were not getting enough textbooks and fees were high, but I was not involved." "Then why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep on asking me for your school fees if you are good as you pretend to be? I would have taken you to another school or found you something better to do. Now you have wasted a lot of money for nothing." He was now very annoyed. I was afraid he would start something worse, but the fact that there were many people restrained him. "Anyway, you know the penalty," he continued. "Pack everything you have, for at this time tomorrow you'll be at home." For the first time since my father started talking, someone else spoke. It was my uncle. "Jack, say something. I never thought there would be a time you have nothing to say. Persuade your father not to take you home. You know, I want you around here. Since you came, I feel my house is more secure even when I'm out." I was very annoyed, for I knew he was mocking me. I knew he liked him as much as he liked a rattlesnake beside him in bed. I knew he wanted me as far away from his house as possible. Only he could not be frank enough to say. They therefore turned to him and said, "Look here, Tom. Do not think even for 1 second that you'll be able to cheat me and please these people. I know as well as you do that you don't like me. I have been standing between you and a lot of things you have always wanted to do. I realized this the day I came home earlier than my usual time, only to find the door locked from inside. You have now forgotten the way you behaved when I saw the girl you had brought home. That girl who sells Kenya charity sweepstakes tickets on the government road." I said that to let others know that not only did I know that he brought women home, but that I also knew which women. I know that was the particular girl who was then with him, but I wanted my accusations to have some weight. I also knew how harsh his wife was, especially where other women were concerned, so I continued. "You also seem to have forgotten the other one who came and..." My mother interfered. by telling me to behave myself and not to show off in front of them. But before she managed to quieten me completely, my aunt jumped in. She seemed to think my mother was defending her brother, and she told her that if she did not mind her husband fooling about with other women, my aunt did, and that it was her business if. There was a lot of noise as the men joined in, each telling his wife to hold her tongue. I was smiling broadly for the first time since we started talking. I felt happy. When all was quiet, I stood up, looked all around, surrounding the table. I then looked at the photos on the picture rail on the wall. I stared at each as if it were my first time to see them. I looked at my brother once more and hated him. I then went to the window, drew the curtains a little bit, and looked outside. I saw a bus come to a stop, pick some people, and drop some. This is what town life is like, I thought, and went back to my seat. I was very quiet and did not say anything. As I sat down, I forced a cough, wondering what would be next. I was well aware that this would be my last time in Nairobi as long as I was to stay under my parents' rule. I also knew that I'd spoilt everything, even if I escaped from home after being taken there. Tom would not accommodate me even for a night. I therefore pulled myself together and prepared for the worst. I came to a conclusion that even if I went home, I would go back to Nairobi with or without their consent. They did not talk more that night, and after a time, we all went to bed. I tried to sleep, but I could not. I had so many thoughts in my mind, but eventually I fell asleep. I woke up very late the following day. I did not want to talk to anybody, so I took my box and started packing. By 12 o'clock that day, we were at Machakos bus stop waiting for a bus to Murang'a. I did not give a damn, for I was doing all that to please them. A day or two after arriving home, I would board another bus to Nairobi. At home, I was welcomed by my young brothers and sisters. They were very happy to see me. They did not seem to know that it was not through my wish that I was at home. They were only very glad that I would be with them. It was not too long before the schools closed, and I was joined by other students from my village from various secondary schools. Then life at home was not very bad. We held many dance parties. It was always a pleasure to go out in groups hunting for dames at night. Then cash, I'd saved about 300 shillings, and that type of life persuaded me to stay at home for about a month. When time came for reopening of schools, I was among the group that boarded at the bus at Thwita Shopping Center. I'd told anyone that I would go. I decided I would write to them when I got settled. When we reached Murang'a, many students alighted there. I also alighted and boarded a Peugeot for Nairobi. I did not even tell my brother where I was off to. Within 2 hours, I was back in Nairobi, and within the next 2, trouble struck. My box containing all my belongings disappeared. That left me with only the clothes I was wearing and 600 shillings that I had taken from my father's coat. This is how it happened. When I alighted from the Peugeot at the Tea Room Hotel, I took my box and went towards the OTC bus terminal. That is the place where I used to pass time while I was at school. I had not decided where I would search for accommodation, but I knew that wherever I went, I was known. I would get accommodation for the day. I was well aware that relying on anyone to accommodate me for a week would be an expecting too much. I put my box down and sat on a form in a waiting room. I was not new in Nairobi, but I looked like a stranger. After resting for about 30 minutes, I left my box and went out. I was carried away by my thoughts. Then I remembered just in time that I had left my box behind. When I went in, I found a smartly dressed boy, almost to my age, sitting right where I'd been sitting. I did not become suspicious. He greeted me cheerfully, and I returned his greetings cheerfully too. "Is this your box?" he asked me. "Yes, it is mine." "Are you new here?" "Next time, don't leave your box unattended to. This is Nairobi. You can lose it at any time if you don't take care." "I'm not new here. I stay in Bahati, and I'm on my way there. I just felt tired and thought of resting a little." "Our school is opening next week on Monday," I lied. "Which is your school?" he asked. "Nairobi School," I lied again. "I'm also a student from Parkland School," he told me. I could have believed him. I did not try to speak English. I decided that if he ever went to school, he did not go beyond standard 7. He was clean and I liked him. We talked about this and that for some time until he decided that he would have some tea. He picked up my box and followed me, and I followed him. He left it with a shoeshine boy at the door whom he talked to. I did not hear what he told him as I was some paces behind him. He then led me towards the Mangu Hotel. We took our seats and ordered tea and some buttered toast. He got busy eating. After finishing, he ordered for 2 glasses of milk. He drank half a glass and stood up. He asked me to excuse him for a minute to go for a short call on the opposite side of the entrance of the hotel. I knew where the toilets were, and therefore I was not suspicious. I continued my glass of milk and toast that was still on my plate. By the time I completed eating, I must have been there alone for more than 3 minutes. I instantly remembered the stories I had heard of people being tricked that way and stood up immediately without even remembering that none of us had settled the bill. As I reached the door, I was grabbed from behind by an angry waiter. "Hey boy, what is the big idea? Do you want me to play rough with you right now?" Sorry, I was in a hurry. I took out £1 note and told him to deduct his dues. I was glad to see that he noticed I had more money in my wallet, lest he should think that I'd been playing again. "I'll come back for change," I said, and went out. When I reached where the shoeshine boy had been, I was surprised to see that the one we had left the box with was not the one who was sitting there. Moreover, the box was not where we had left it. "Where's the owner of this stand?" I asked the new man. "I'm the owner. What do you want?" "And where is the man who was here about 10 minutes ago?" "No one has been here except me since morning. I don't share this stand with anyone. What's wrong?" "If you are the one who was here about 10 minutes ago, you are then the one we left my box with. Where is it then?" "Are you sure you left your box with me? Are you sure you know what you are talking about?" I was scared. I knew that these 2 crooks were very rough. They started shouting at me and people started gathering. I did not want to make a scene. I tried to persuade him to lower his voice, but instead he shouted even more loudly. He wanted a showdown, something I guess he knew I couldn't stand. What am I to do? I asked myself. Some of the people in the crowd were sympathetic. I tried to prove my innocence by saying I was a schoolboy. When they asked me whether he was really the man I had left the box with, I told them he was not. But the one we gave the box was sitting there. I gave them the whole story. Some of them laughed and went away, and others advised me to call the police. That idea pleased me. I entered the booking room right at the corner and going to the telephone, dialed 999. A certain man approached me as I was dialing the number. He advised me to say that was the man I had left my box with. He told me that if I said so, the man would agree to show the police the man who really went with my box. "Hello, 999, a voice said. "Can I help you?" "Yes, sir," I said. "What is your problem?" "I'm a schoolboy, sir. I left my box with a certain shoeshine boy here, and he has refused with it." "Is that all?" "Yes, sir. Where are you?" "I am at OTC booking office, sir. He's just at the front door sitting on his stool." "Okay, hang around. I'll send some policemen there in 2 minutes, understand?" "Yes, sir." He hung up and went out. There were people still around who knew what was going on. I could see that they were very curious to know what could happen. The man was still sitting where I had left him. He did not seem to worried at all, even though he knew that I had been advised to call the police. He probably thought I would give the story as I had given it to the crowd. And if so, he was underrating me. I could tell by the scars on his face that he had known trouble. Everyone around me was looking at me, telling me to give the story exactly as I had given it to them. Within a minute, I saw a police 99 car turning from Duke Street, now Ronald Gala, to Race Course Road. It stopped abruptly after passing the bus stop. Two police officers jumped over at the 3-foot high fence and came straight where we were. The crowd scattered and stood some distance away. I was left alone with the man. One of the policemen looked at me and asked, "Are you the boy who just phoned the police?" "Yes, sir." "And is this the man you talked about?" he asked, pointing with his forefinger at the shoeshine boy. "Yes, sir, he is the one," I said. "Okay, get up." He got hold of the man by the collar and hauled him to his feet. The other one got hold of his right arm and twisted it until he cried in pain. One cop turned to me and told me to follow them. The shoeshine boy was thrown into the police car. He did not protest anyway. I entered the car too. I was asked whether there was any person among the crowd who saw me leave the box without man. I told them the only person who was there was the shoeshine boy's customer, and I did not know him. The other police said it was not necessary. In a minute, we were at Kamkunji police station. Sometimes, even the oddest thing can turn out to be funny. I said to myself, here is me, Jack, back in Nairobi, but this time on my own. Within 3 hours after leaving home, I have lost my box. Within 4 hours, I am seated in a police station writing a statement and giving a funny story. A story that has been hammered into my head by a stranger. Anyway, that was the beginning. The Swahili say that what you are not taught by your parents, you'll be taught by the world. I think that was the time the world started teaching me, and it has really taught me. At the police station, the shoeshine boy was taken to the cells. I then gave my story to a police inspector who sympathized with me. The shoeshine boy was then called and asked to explain. He rejected my version of the story and said that I had given it differently from the way I had given it to the crowd at the OTC offices. He gave his own account, but no one listened to him. He was then ushered into an inner room where I could hear him being worked on. He was beaten until he could not talk, but he stuck to his story. After some minutes, he was locked in the cells. I was asked for my address, but the inspector gave a false one. I also gave a false name. By the time I was convinced that I would not get back my box, I knew too that they were asking for my address so that they would later come for me to be a prosecution witness when the shoeshine boy was taken to court. I had no time for that. I did not even know where I would be by then. Later, they asked if I would like them to come to take me to my uncle, but I said I was all right. I walked out of the office and out of the police station. That night, I slept in a lodging at Small World nightclub, drunk and with a war beside me for the first time. I spent about 100 shillings, including the 10 shillings I gave her the following morning. After finishing myself, I went out to the shops and bought myself a new box and some clothes. After buying the lot, I had only 175 shillings left. How long will that push me, I wonder? For some months after finishing all the money I had, I really got into a problem. I would sometimes get very hungry until once I thought of selling the clothes I had. When I went to a man who was selling second-hand clothes, he told me he would give 3 shillings for a shirt I had bought for over 30 shillings. When I asked him how much he would give for my watch, which was worth 100 shillings, he said he would not give more than 7 shillings. I got annoyed and left him. I did not have any penny in my pockets, and I had not eaten for almost 2 days. The previous night I had spent in the open. It made me remember the prodigal son. He, however, was better off. He had leaves to eat, but nothing except the stones on the roadside. Can you imagine someone swallowing stones? I left Kariakor where I had gone to sell my clothes and went towards the town center. On my way, a beggar on the roadside stretched out his arm with much hope. I nearly hit him. He was better off than I was. He had the guts to beg. I did not. And I was even tempted to pick 30 cents from the ground between his legs. Believe me, I nearly picked the money. I did not meet anybody who could have mercy upon a dying man. I did not even meet those I knew. All the faces I met were new. At OTC, I entered the booking office and sat down on one of the forms as I was waiting for a bus. I still had my suitcase. The place was very crowded that day, for it was the end of the month and the weekend. Everybody except me seemed very busy. There was also a boy about my age who seemed busy too. He also had a box. What attracted me to him was that the way in which he behaved, he seemed very uneasy. I said from the thought that I was hungry. I had not eaten 2 suppers and a lunch. This was yet another lunchtime, and I still had nothing to eat. Suddenly, I saw him look from side to side, and satisfied that he was not being watched, he pulled a wallet from the back pocket of an old man, well-suited padre. The wallet was quite fat. For no reason at all, I was filled with fear. My heart skipped a beat. My hands started shaking, and yet I was not the one who was pickpocketing. As the wallet left the pocket, the boy turned, and saw that I was staring at him. As the wallet left the pocket, the boy turned and saw that I was staring at him with my mouth wide open. The boy put the wallet in his breast pocket. He passed me and signaled me to follow him. I knew he was afraid that I may raise an alarm, but he was wrong. That was one of the few things I could not do. I followed him to Kaka Hotel, where we were seated. We ordered food for both of us. We were very busy there, and none seemed to notice the other. As we waited for our order, he told me, next time, never stare at someone that way. You almost made the padre suspicious. What do you do for a living? He asked me. I am one of you, I answered. When it comes to questions and answers, I'm very good at them. I never hesitate answering. A pickpocket, you mean? Yeah. Yes. When I'm badly off. And why do you seem so surprised? I wanted you to think exactly as you did and do just what you did. I followed that man for over 2 hours. He was given that cash by his son at GPO. Since then, we have gone to 101 places. He bought so many things that I was afraid that he would have nothing left for me, but he had plenty. Bring my share so that I may pay for my plate. Things may turn hot and each run his way. As you say, I also thought that the padre got suspicious. He may bust in here any time. Thieves are very funny. They are cowardly. I did not expect this one to part with anything so easy. To my surprise, he looked left and right, and satisfied that nobody was interested in our presence, he took out the wallet. The waiter brought our order, and the boy put the wallet under the table. When the waiter went, he unzipped the wallet under the table. I bent to his side and made sure I saw all the contents in the wallet. My curiosity had outdone my hunger. Brother, the wallet was not fat for nothing. The first sight told me that there was not less than 800 shillings. There was a small bundle of 100 shillings notes and another of 50 shillings notes. The red ones were 7 and the other ones were 6. He gave me 4 of the red ones and 2 of the 50 ones. I did not even want to know what the inner pocket of the wallet contained. 500 shillings for nothing was too much. I quickly pocketed the cash and then I remembered that I was hungry. When I started eating, I did it at a rather astonishing speed. My man then gave me the wallet and told me to go and get rid of it on my way home. That thing really gave me a hard time. Before then, I'd never held a stolen article or cash in my hand, except the 600 shillings that I had taken from my father's coat, but I counted it. That was my share. Mother had given my brother more than that for school fees, and the same day I left home. I was fearing that after I dumped the wallet, the police would find it, search the fingerprints, and I thought they could trace me anywhere as soon as the prints were detected. That was how naive I was then. After finishing our lunch, we got busy talking. I learned that my man lived in Makadara, where he shared a room with 2 other boys. The room cost 100 shillings per month. Can that room of yours take 4 beds? I want to shift from where I stay. The police are frequenting that area so much these days. I'm staying in Isili Section 2. I lied. You are lucky, Jack. One of the boys is shifting tomorrow. He's going to stay with his girl in Kangemi. His girl's mother, who owed a lot of plot there, died last month, and she asked him to go and stay with her. So tomorrow you can shift. That boy might have gone even today. We shall go together there and see what is going on. Thank you. Let's go and have a bottle or 2 there, Osana. I told him. We left the hotel and went to Kayu Bar, where we had taken about 3 bottles of beer each. There entered 2 gentlemen who made my friend turn almost stiff. He did not even want us to drain the half glasses of beer we had on the table. After paying the bill, we hurriedly left. He took me to Jamii Bar. We drank for some hours, and after around 9 o'clock, we went and hired a taxi to Makadara. Once there, he led me to the block of the flats at the far corner of Makadara Avenue and opened his room. He lit the room, and I saw that although it had 3 beds, there was plenty of room for 1 more bed. I was not very drunk, as I never take much drinking with new people. The room also had a table and 3 dining chairs near the window at one corner. The following morning, we woke up late. None of the other boys had come, but I could judge by their belongings that they knew they were around. I also learned that the boy who was shifting was a clerk with MOW, that is, the Ministry of Works. My friend, who I discovered was called Wanjau, told me to go and bring my belongings. He said that he would wait for me to come back and also see if other men would come. In town, I bought myself a Volvo bed, a mattress, and 2 pillows. The bed was big enough for 2, and I knew that at times I would have visitors. I then bought 3 blankets, 2 sheets, the bed cover. I was ready with cooked up reasons why I had to buy new beddings. I then hired a taxi, and within a short time I was back at Makadara. I found the man who was moving just about to go, and Wanjau introduced us. I took his position into the room and made my bed. Nothing was more necessary. For one thing, no one cooked there, no one had a wife. So at long last, I got a place where I could rest my limbs after sleeping on the pavements for some days. The next day, we got information the other occupant of the room had been arrested. He had been In for 2 days. He had been arrested after a fight at night. He was taken to police station after his fingerprints were taken to the CRO for checking. The results showed that those were the same fingerprints which were found on an abandoned car that had been stolen outside Ambassador Hotel, in which had been used as a getaway car in a certain robbery in South Sea. At the police station, when we went to see him, he told us the whole story, but there was nothing we could do to help him. Months later, he was found guilty of stealing a car and was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. He was discharged on a robbery sheet, for the prosecution witnesses could not identify him. So the room now was for the two of us. The one thing with the criminals is that they pay their house rents in advance. Right then, they had paid for over 3 months. Since one person was already in prison and the other one had shifted, I was entitled to the share of the rent. It was a very nice room. I enjoyed the time I stayed there. I was now becoming my own boss and depending on myself, bringing women home whenever I felt like. I had become so close to Wanjau that we never left each other's side. He was a well-behaved person. So now I was back in Nairobi on my own, but this time with a different occupation. I was now a pickpocket under instruction. I had so far managed to pick the pockets of about 6 people and had got away with about 1,500 shillings, which I had shared with Wanjau. He was, of course, a professional and I only an amateur. Of those 6 times, I was almost caught 3 times, and so I had already started hating the job. Anyway, at the end of every month, we managed to make more than 3,000 shillings. So the rent and clothes were no problem. The worst thing, and especially for me, was the risk involved. Most of the time, Wanjau did the picking, but there were times when he would tell me to do it. I was very new at it. I depended on him very much. Months and months passed, and now I'd come to know several barmaids and common prostitutes in town. I had changed greatly. For over a year, I had not visited home, nor had got any reports from about my people there. I don't even know the fate of my brother, who by then had gone to school, had done his school certificate. Within that time, I had been in and out of various police stations more than 10 times. I had been fined 3 times for being drunk and disorderly, and 2 more times for assault, and other times I was lucky to get away with merely entering the dock. With 2 years, that is, between 1965 to 1967, I had become known to many criminals, from robbers to car breakers, shop breakers, to car thieves and racketeers. I had also come to be known by the name Jack Zolo. I left the risky job for picking pockets and joined the car breakers. This was a risky too, but not as half risky as picking pockets. Besides, the job paid almost twice as much as the other. We broke into tourist cars mostly, or cars that we had good reasons to believe carried enough goods. I had joined a group of 3 boys who had been in the job for some time. Later, I came to understand that these boys were tricky. We would break into a car and get 3 or 4 expensive cameras, pairs of binoculars, tape recorders, radios, suitcases with dollars inside and such. But when it came to selling them, the boys never gave the right figure about the amount they had received. So they wisened me up. If one got cash which the other were not aware of, he would keep it to himself. So after sharing what he all knew about, it disappeared until they had finished what they had. The others would run broke far ahead of me. When a thief has enough cash, he will not take a job, however much it might pay. So if you have a job that needs 4 people and you are only 3, you are handicapped and you have to find other means to get some cash to push ahead until the 4th person runs broke. One night, Wanjau failed to come home for the night. I was surprised, for we had agreed that no one should sleep out without notifying the other. We had agreed that if one of us went missing, The other was to go on various police stations within the town to check. I therefore left home at around 8 the following morning. I had a terrible hangover, but I knew that 2 pints of milk would do the trick. I left him previous night in Ruathia nightclub, talking to a barmaid called Jane Jerry. He had assured me in the front of her that he would come home, and now that he did not come, I took it that the girl knew his whereabouts. I alighted the bus at Tasker House and crossed the road towards Therese Hotel. Outside the hotel, someone caught me by my right arm. It was the very girl I was looking for. Zolo, did you go to see Wanjao in Central Police Station? She asked me before saying anything. I'm not aware that he is there. In fact, I left home to come and see you so that I may know what happened. So he is in Central? What did he do? I don't know for sure. He left me sitting at the very corner you left us last night and went to the toilet. As he was coming back, a man and a girl followed by 3 policemen came in, pointed at him and said, "This is one of them." There were 3 and I recognized this one because of the red polo neck he's wearing. But he was not wearing a red polo neck. When I left him, he had a black V-shaped sweater. He also had a black corduroy coat. So when did he change into a red polo neck? Just about 10 minutes later after you left. A man he later told me was called Kanyaru came in a hurry as if he would be chased. When he saw Wanjao, he told him to follow him to the toilet. When they came out, Wanjao was wearing the red polo neck. The other man was wearing the sweater and the corduroy coat and went upstairs. 3 minutes later, the police and 2 arrived. He did not even try to defend himself. In fact, he did not even get the chance to. The girl was screaming at him, and I noticed her dress was torn at the breast. As for the man, he was not speaking, but his forehead was bleeding slightly. My God, that is robbery with violence, and there's nothing I can do to help him. If I go to see him at the station, I will be arrested for as one of the 2. Now, this is what you'll do. I'll give you some money. Go and buy thermos flask, some tea, and a loaf of bread. Take to him. You won't be able to eat, but you must do it. He will then tell you what he wants us to do. I will come and see you at Ruathia around lunchtime. Understood? Yes, I understand, she said. I gave her the cash and we parted. I was quite sure that was the end of the road for Wanjao. He would get no less than 14 years. The new law on robbery with violence was by then at its worst, and everyone arrested and charged, and it was going in, whether he was guilty or not. There were 2 people to say that he was one of the crooks who attacked them. How was the judge to know that they were lying? At the same time, I was quite sure that Wanjao was not going to tell the truth about what really happened. He would not say that he had exchanged clothes with a man he believed was escaping arrest. It would only prove that they were together. Wanjao was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment with 20 strokes of cane. He was given the right of appeal within 2 weeks. It was all useless to appeal, for nothing happened. I am with him in prison as I write this book. Now I was all alone in the house at Makadara. I was to pay 100 shillings at the end of the next month, but that was not the problem. The problem was these 2 beds and boxes belonging to the 2 in prison. I did not know where any of them came from. When I went to Kamiti prison to inquire about Wanjao, I was told that he was not there. When I asked where he could have been taken to, I was told he might be in Mombasa. Well, I was not going to go all the way to Mombasa just to ask a criminal where he has come, where his home was. And for the other, I didn't even know his name. The MOW clerk who went to stay with his girlfriend never turned up since his departure. So what else was I to do but to sell all the lot to the landlord? After all, I wanted to buy a modern furniture for the room. Now that I was alone, I had to keep pretending to be a qualified clerk somewhere. I even had to bring more decent girls Oh, all this happened within 2 years. And in those 2 years, nobody in my family knew my whereabouts. I'd never even met one accidentally, not even Tom, my uncle. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2. One day, a few weeks after I had cleared the house of my mate's property, I lay on my bed thinking of how I would fill the room with better furniture. I wanted to buy at least 1 or 2 sofa sets, as the room was large enough to hold them now, and it had only 1 bed, about 3 tables, a small wardrobe, a kitchen cupboard, and a charcoal burner, a stove, cooking utensils, a carpet, and better curtains. When I estimated their total cost on a rough paper, I found that they needed something close to 2,000 shillings. But right then, I was holding the pen. I had only a little over 100 shillings. That was 1,900 shillings less. From where do I get the rest? I asked myself. I felt hungry and got up. I put on my shoes and my coat, and I decided to take my lunch in town. So after locking my house, I boarded a bus for town. I went to Terrace Hotel, and I was about to finish my lunch when a friend of mine called Captain Ngugi entered. He was with another man whom he introduced to me. He ordered some lunch for them. These boys were so nutty that they made me feel a little inferior, smart as I was. Over the lunch, at the lonely corner where we were, Captain told me a story that entered my veins. Zolo, this friend of mine and I want a man we can trust, he started. I could see that he was looking from side to side to make sure that no one was listening. There wasn't anyone near, so he continued. I am well aware of the job you do, and most of you guys are too cowardly to take on a big job. A job like robbery, I mean. But what I want you to know is that whether you like it or not, you'll once be in the job. Anyway, as you can see, 2 of your gang members are now in prison. I understand that Wanjao was in prison for 15 years, yet he was never robbed in his goddamn life. He was your friend, and you know that he would not have robbed anybody or connected himself with anybody who could go for robbery. So I guess, as a wise boy, you must have learned a lesson there. Now then, we'd like you to join us in a certain job. Are you going to take it? I considered all the facts silently and quickly. It was true I feared robbery, as it carried a very severe sentence. By then, I considered Wanjao's case. 15 years for nothing? Then 2 of my members had been caught red-handed breaking into a car. When they tried to escape, one was shot in the leg and the other was shot in the neck. The latter almost died, but he was lucky because the bullet passed through the muscles of his neck and went out without severing any artery. Still, it had made him fall down flat, as if he had been hit with 1-ton kosh at the back of his head. Fingerprint from the cars they had broken into were brought up in the court. They got 11 years with 33 strokes. The third fact was that I needed money to furnish my house. I was sure that I could get money on my own. But right then, I had no plans. The amount I wanted this time was quite a lot, and after all, I could not expect things to fall from above, as people from my home used to say. I would do it, whatever the consequences, I calculated. What was more risky than picking people's pockets? I asked myself. Captain knew I was thinking about it, and he gave me time to do it. I knew one of their gangsters had earlier retired after sharing a total of 80,000 shillings from a robbery. He had bought a Peugeot 404 family saloon for road services. What is the job? I asked Captain. I told you it is robbery with violence. My heart skipped a bit when he added the words, with violence. Where violence was concerned, the court was very strict. You told me that before, but where is the job? It is not a tough job, Zolo. Stop trembling. It will need only 4 of us, and it is not in town. It will be outside a certain bank in Westlands. A certain white man will be taking his money there with a big bag, and your only job will be to snatch it. I'll be covering you, and this man here will be covering the driver. Simple as that. Now the question is this: are you taking the job? Supposing I do, when will it take place? No suppositions. You are taking the job or you go. We'll find someone else. Okay, you win. When do we pull it off? Tomorrow morning at 9:30. Where do you stay? In Isili section 2, I lied, for I did not see the reason why you should know where I stayed. I see. You know Westlands very well, don't you? I do, yes. Alright, we will meet at Ajib Motel in Westland, 4 of us, so that we may all know each other. So far, it is only the driver you haven't met, and I guess you know him. Everything is ready, and all you have to do is to come early and arm yourself with a semi. What the hell do I need the semi for if my only job is to snatch? Things might go wrong, you fool. And you may need to defend yourself with it. Or do you think it is your father's money we are going for? He may play it tough and refuse with the job. You have never dealt with these white people. You wait and see. Now it was making me really sweat. If the one white man played it tough with me, then I was sunk. And Captain talked as if he was sure that the white man would not part with the bag easily. At the bar, Captain ordered 3 bottles of beer for each one of us. There was no more to be discussed, so I drained mine in haste and excused myself. Captain went out with me to rebrief me. Come at around 8, so that we may have time to arrange our positions. Our driver is working on the car, so I cannot tell you for sure its registration number. All I know is that it's a Cortina GT. You will know the rest when you come. Remember the scene before. It can turn out very helpful sometimes. You may need a newspaper too to keep yourself busy while waiting. Not for reading though, because if you take too much interest in it, you may not notice him. I'll point out the European to you long before he goes to bring the money, so it will not be hard for you to identify him. Is there anything you don't understand? Well, I guess not. I'll be ready with everything. You can rely on me, Captain, I said. That pleased him very much. The way in which he had briefed me made me like him. With his education, you'd not have thought he could be a robber. He had lost 3 responsible jobs. Then he had thought it wise to try the other side of the law. When he was sure that I was well informed, he wished me a good time and went back to the bar. I was feeling very nervous and I wanted time to rest and think. I boarded a bus outside Terrace Hotel, and in 30 minutes I was in my house resting and thinking. This was the first time that an idea of going to rob had been put in my mind. The thought of prison sentence it carried broke my heart into pieces. But now I had agreed to participate. There was no turning back if I cared for my peace, which I did. Well, if this room is not filled within a week from now, it will never be filled, I said to myself. Then, still in deep thought, I got up and went outside to the place where I kept my semi. I took it out, wrapped it in my sweater, then I entered the house with it. I was sure no one noticed. I unwrapped it and saw that it was fine, as I had kept it months back. I had not bought it for committing robberies. Most criminals keep semis for self-defense. We were always in trouble, either with the police or with other criminals. It looked very new and sharp too. I put it under the bed, then lit a cigarette. As I lit it, I heard a steady knock at the door. Good God! What am I in for now? I asked loudly, hiding the semi under the pillow. As I did so, before I had admitted the knocker, the door opened and a girl I recognized as one of the tenants in the same plot I was living in came in. I had never talked to her before, despite the fact that we were staying in the same block. It was her first time to enter the room, as far as I knew. Welcome, miss. How do you do? Oh, thank you. How do you do? When I noticed you're in, I thought I should visit you, for you never invite us here, and neither do you talk to us. She said this as I pointed to the bed for a seat. There were no chairs. The only ones that had been there had long gone with the MOW clerk to his girlfriends. The seat I could now provide were a suitcase, a wooden box, and a bed. I have no chairs here, miss, so please select the place that most suits you. She sat on the bed. Then tell me, you and who else don't I invite? Or didn't I hear your remark well? You heard me well, Zola. I'm talking about my roommate and me. You know my name then? How did you come across it? Wanjao was a friend of mine, though you didn't know. Not much of a friend anyway, she said as an afterthought. To put it more correctly, he was my acquaintance. So he told me of you when you came to live here. Well, that takes care of that. Now we come to your problem. I guess you didn't come all the way to introduce yourself and just to make me know that you know me. Isn't that so, miss? I was being rude deliberately. One thing I never liked was getting too acquainted with the walls around my residential area. Supposing I came home with a new girl and they made a scene. Moreover, I was breaking most of my connections with prostitutes as a whole, and especially such as this one. But the most important reason for my rudeness was that right then, I wanted to be left completely alone. I could see that she was about to notice the simi under the bed as part of it was protruding. She wasn't even sitting still on the bed and kept on wriggling her buttocks in the process, moving the pillows from their positions. Don't be rude, Zola. Must you be that way even to a visitor? I am not rude, miss. That is the way I talk, if you must know. Talk business, and I guess that way we'll understand each other. If it is about being broke and you want to give me a ride for £1, I'm sorry to inform you that I'm impotent. For as long as I've stayed with you here, you'll have noticed that I never bring women home. If you ever seen one, know that she is here for other businesses. I wonder why Wanjao didn't tell you this. Must be naughty, Zola, or maybe I came in at the wrong time. I'll excuse you for the time being, but count on it that I'll come back one of these days when you are in the right mood. Save your calories for the future use, for someone else, baby. I never want company, and if I ever do, I know where to get it from. Anyway, I wish you a nice time. Don't see me again if you want peace. When she had gone, I took the simi and locked it in the wooden box. I went back and lay on the bed. I felt so uneasy until I began to think the girl was right when she suggested that I needed company. I even wondered why I had turned the girl down in such a hurry. Maybe her presence would have made me forget this thing that was stinging my head. I really needed company. I must have fallen asleep without knowing, for when I woke up, I was in total darkness, and my watch claimed it was 10 minutes past 8. I felt hungry. I put on the light, put on my coat, and went out in search of supper. Back home after supper, I selected a drum magazine and tried to read. I couldn't. I took the day's newspaper which I had bought, but that too couldn't do me any good. I felt that I couldn't stay alone that night, so I went out and boarded a bus for town. I went to the new Ruathian. As I was taking my second bottle of beer, a girl invited herself and sat on a chair beside me. She refused to take any intoxicants, and I ordered some soda for her. We introduced ourselves, me giving a false name. After some bottles, I proposed that we should go to some place if she did not have any more business around. She agreed on the usual terms, and so we left. Back in Makadara, I sat on the bed and started thinking, here I am back in my house, sitting on a bed with a girl who, no doubt, will demand £1 tomorrow morning. Yet some hours earlier, I turned down one who I was sure was offering herself to me free of charge. Now the trouble is, I must wake up very early tomorrow so that I can get rid of this one and then prepare myself for the greatest risk I have ever taken. I thought of praying, but in the darkness I said the Lord's Prayer. That was as much as I could do. I was not going to pray to God to help me as I was about to fornicate. And I was not going to pray to God that helped me because the following day I was going to rob a white man of his money. My God, what should I do? The girl touched me and all that faded away. She was definitely earning her pound. Before I slept, I asked her to make sure that she woke me up early in the morning in case I overslept. When I woke up the following morning, I felt very fine. I took a bath and selected a suit. I then took my kimono and wore it. The girl was ready. I took her to the bus stop and I went back home. Now I took the simi and placed it against the outer side of my left thigh. I then tightened the belt to hold my simi in place. I noticed as I lit cigarette that my hands were very steady. I went to a nearby tea kiosk where I could only stand and ordered a pint of milk and some butter toast. If all goes well, I'll be a rich boy when I pass here again, I thought. But then, if it turns out the other way around, this is the last pint of milk I will have for years. An instinct told me to hope for the best, but to prepare for the worst. At about 7:45, I was in Ajip Motel. I had a Daily Nation newspaper and I pretended to be busy reading and waiting for somebody. Through the corner of my eye, I saw Captain Ngugi and his friend. They seemed very happy to see me, as if they had not expected me to turn up. They led me to where the driver, David Mwangi, was. We knew each other, and I was glad that he was our driver. It was going to be my first time to travel in a stolen car after a raid, and I felt very uneasy. I knew Mwangi had done a good job to get the car, but that did not make me feel any better. A few yards from where our car was, a white man came and parked a Citroen. Captain told me to look at him very closely. He closed his car and entered the motel. After about 30 minutes, he came out and went off in his car. Captain said, "Now, when he comes again, he will be carrying a large brown bag, and it will be not less than 30,000 shillings. Mwangi, you will park the car facing the road. When you see the white man, you start the engine. Sammy will be somewhere near you in case you are suspected by a pedestrian. You, Zolo, will be reading the paper near the bank as if you are a customer, waiting for it to open. We will come facing you and I'll be behind you. You will start walking as if you just remembered something you ought to do before you get into the bank, and as you pass him by, you will snatch the bag, jump forward, and take out your simi. By the time you do that, I will have worked on him pretty well. I assure you he will not try to hold you after what I shall have done. Only make sure you don't cut him to death. I can't stand a murder trial," I said. "I've got better ideas than cutting up a young man. You are new in this, you wait and see. In Mwangi, as we come, make sure all the doors are open. Zolo and Sammy will use the back seat, and take care you don't drop the bag in fear." We went to the bank and each took his position. Mwangi was not there. He was to bring the car when he saw Citroen. I got busy reading the paper, pretending to read. A man passed by and I saw him stare at the paper I was reading, and then at me. I thought he could see what I carried inside my coat. Some yards away from me, he looked at me and stopped. He was a Luo. I got frightened. I looked at myself closely to make sure that there was no visible sign of my carrying simi. Then satisfied, I looked at him. He smiled at me and went away. As I looked at my paper again, I noticed that I had been reading it upside down. I also smiled as I turned it the right side up. And I knew then that it was the reason the man thought I was phoning around there. If that is what he thought, the bank had just opened. The red Citroen arrived just as I was turning over another page. My heart increased its beat by 1 or 2. I felt heat all over me. At the corners of my eye, I saw Captain, who had not changed his position. Then I saw Mwangi parking the car as agreed. Sammy came up to him and greeted him joyfully, as if they had not met for many years. I then saw Mwangi lit a cigarette. I turned around and looked at Captain, who winked at me. The white man was by then locking his skirt, holding a large brown bag with his left hand. He then started coming towards the bank. I closed and folded my newspaper and put it in my coat pocket. I also felt for the simi and satisfied myself that it was there. I was trembling, but not too much to be noticed. When he was about 4 meters away from me, I started moving towards him, pretending not to notice him. He had shifted the bag to the right, so I kept left. Just as I was about to pass him, I struck the bag so strongly that instead of the bag being in my possession, I fell down some yards away from it. I had not expected a gunshot. I did not even know that we had one. The first thought that entered my mind was that it was the police. I gripped the simi very tightly. Then I heard the captain's voice. "Don't you dare touch that boy. Put your hands up and face the other way." It was then that I took the bag and fled into the getaway car, which was in the center of the road with its door open. Captain fired more shots in the air as we entered the car. The pistol shots frightened me so much. I did not notice that I had dropped my simi. In fact, I only came to know it was lost as we were abandoning our car. We drove off towards town, past Central Police Station, then entered Government Road until we found our way to Eastleigh Section 2. We abandoned the car and went off with our bag full of money. On the 13th Street, Mwangi opened the room and we went inside. I was sweating. I did not mention the loss of my simi, for if I did, I knew they would all be as restless as I was, and there could be no one to ease the other's burden. The cash was all poured on the bed, so many 100 shillings notes, 50, 20, 10, and 5. I was given the job of counting as I was regarded as being fresh from school. I did it, but it was with great struggle that I had managed to hide my shock. I'd never seen so much money before, and I'd never expected to. A total of 33,000 shillings. Captain said, "Okay, divide the cash between 5 people and keep it in the bundles." "No," Mwangi said, "first take out the 3,000 shillings on top, then keep 5 heaps of 6,000 shillings each." I did that. I was not asking any questions. All I wanted was to get my share and run as far away as I could from that house. After getting my 6,000 shillings, I did not even want to know how. I did not even want to know where the rest was to be taken, though it was explained to me later. The information had come from the white man's chauffeur, and he was entitled to a share. Then the one who had given us his gun would get the other 6,000. I filled all my pockets with money in a hurry and stood up. Captain looked at me and said, "Where is your simi?" "I've got it here," I lied, indicating where it had been before. "I told you there would be no trouble. Now look, you have got 6 grand of your own. You never get that much from a job. Now you have teamed with us and we admit you in our company. You acted a little frightened, but it was all right since it was your first robbery. Next time you will do better." "Okay, boys, I want to run along. I have other things to do," I said. They all stood up and we went out. Once in the street, each went his own way. I took a bus to town, and at Tusker House I alighted, crossed Duke Street, now called Ronald Ngala, and outside Therese Hotel, I boarded another bus for Makadara. I was feeling every eye on me. I thought everyone I met was suspicious, and I thanked God for not letting me meet a cop, for I would have given myself away. The money was feeling pretty hot in my pockets. At Makadara, I passed the very kiosk where I had taken milk and butter toast earlier and smiled when I remembered my thoughts. One of the thoughts had come true. I was very rich. I opened my house and entered, took off my kimono and my coat and hung them on the wall. I went to the bed and sat down. I noticed I was sweating a lot. That was my first time to have such an amount of money, and I was a bit confused. I thought of buying a second-hand car. Then I remembered that I would have to employ a driver. I thought of buying a plot. Then I remembered that it cost 30,000 shillings. I realized that the money had confused me completely. I took out a cigarette and lit it. As I was putting the lighter back, it fell down, and as I was picking it up, I saw a piece of paper under the bed. I took it. It had an estimate of the house furniture I was planning to buy. I had completely forgotten all about it. What kind of a man am I proving to be? I asked myself. I had agreed to take the risk because I wanted to furnish my house, and now that I had more money than I wanted, the idea had vanished from my mind. I thought of going to town right then, but remembered it must be hot. If I went out buying all those things as soon as after we pulled the job, I would look suspicious. So that must wait until tomorrow or the day after. Again, it was some days to the end of the month and most people were broke, but that did not matter much. I could be taken for a businessman, and those always have money. Even at the time when people say the month is at the corner, money is always circulating. Doesn't mean that all the money is locked up somewhere and taken out only at the end of the month. So I decided to buy the furniture the following day. I would also buy a radio and a record player. A tape recorder too would do if all goes well, I said to myself. I opened the suitcase and arranged the notes there in order of value from 5 shillings notes to 5 verse. I took 2 50 notes and went out. I felt I needed something to cool my body. I was sweating too much for my comfort. I did not want to go to town, and I did not even want to meet anybody who knew me. So the best thing I thought was to go to a location where I was not known. I decided to go to Jericho, and I set off on foot. At Jericho Social Hall, I stopped for about 3 minutes to read some adverts on movies and dances. I decided I would see the movies and attend the dances when the time came. In any case, I would not miss both. I entered a bar, went to the hotel room, and ordered for some food. It was a bit too early for a beer, so I ordered a pint of condensed milk from the refrigerator and started relaxing. As I was drinking the last drop of milk from the glass, I felt someone touch me in the back. A very soft hand that I knew even before I turned that belonged to a female. That was the greatest surprise I had had for the past 3 years. Behind me stood my sister. When I looked up, she was staring at me with her mouth wide open. I guess her mouth could see better than her eyes. I was surprised to see her all right, but not half as surprised as she was to see me. Behind her stood a very nutty, medium-aged man, about 5 feet 10, brown with a hollow face. There was something about him that made my heart skip a beat. He also came forward and looked at me, smiling broadly. My sister spoke first. "Jack, it can't be you. All these years." She could not go further. She started weeping. The man comforted her, then asked me to follow them out. As we went out, she stopped weeping and started sighing. I remembered that I had not settled my bill and went back to pay. Then joined them outside. "Sonny Connie, I didn't mean to run away from you, but I had to run away from home. We will talk about that later. Let us go to my place." So I followed them. She was not even able to introduce me to the man she was with. The other surprise was that she was telling me to go with her to her home. The last time I saw her, over 2 years back, she was at our home, teaching in Twitter school. Now she was talking about her home in Nairobi. 10 minutes later, we stood in front of her house in Uhuru Estate, and she was knocking at the door. A maid opened it, and we entered a very well-furnished room with a heavy carpet and a very fine double sofa set. I selected a seat and made myself comfortable. The man spoke. "Mary, so this is the brother you always talk about?" "Yes, he's the one." Then turning to me, she added, Jack, meet Kamau, my husband. We have been married for over a year now. You can see these photographs. She picked two different wedding photos from the picture rail on the wall and showed them to me. The first one was her and her husband, the other was of both families. I looked at my mother closely and saw she was somehow excited. My father was lifting his right hand with forefinger up indicating peace. He was grinning. Brother Sammy had his whole mouth wide open. Three of my younger sisters were wearing the uniform of bridesmaids. Everyone else in the family was there except me. Satisfied, I looked up. I saw then the shock on her face had vanished, and she looked herself again. We stared at each other until I looked away. In fact, I was not enjoying myself. I loved that girl so much, but I hated the thought that she got married in my absence. But then, who was to blame? None of us, I concluded. I then shook hands with my brother-in-law. I was glad to meet him. He appeared to me as one of those characters you feel safe when he's around. Then the endless questions and answers started. Why did you run away? Where did you stay? Where do you stay? What do you do? Where will you go back? When will you go back home? Would you like any help? And so many others. But as I have told you, I am very good at answers and reasoning. I gave them such a story that I almost believed it myself. At last I said to Connie, I am sorry you got married in my absence, but anyway, there's nothing I could have done to make it look better than it appears in the photos. I wish you happiness and the best wishes. Now that I have known your home, I will be visiting you. What else could I say? The radio started playing Kanu Yajenga Nchi, which meant that it was time for the news. My mind had been so occupied with the encounter with my sister that I had forgotten everything else. When the reader started the news in the brief, we kept quiet. But my mind was not in the news. There was nothing in my mind except the happiness and the confusion after meeting my sister, Connie, whom I loved more than any other member of my family. I was not in my case very good at listening to radios. I preferred newspapers, though they were always 12 hours late. Then I had it. 4 bandits got away with 33 shillings outside a bank in Westlands this morning. I almost jumped out of my seat. I had forgotten all that, and now listened more attentively. 4 bandits, armed with a pistol and a simis, got away with 33,000 shillings outside KCB in Westlands this morning. The money was being taken to the bank by the manager of Lovers Wool Limited. After snatching the money, they fired a bullet in the air, forcing the manager to put up his hand and to turn around facing the wall. A young boy estimated to be between 18 to 23 and smartly dressed snatched the bag. While struggling to enter the getaway car, he dropped his simi. The police are working on his prints. An early arrest is expected. You can imagine how I felt. The simi, for instance, had gone out of my mind. Now there it was, in the hands of the police, and they were sure to get my fingerprints. I felt heat replace the cool atmosphere that was in the room. I felt sweat on my face, my sister's eyes on me. I had to go, for if I didn't, I would give myself away. My brother-in-law stood up and went to the toilet. I told my sister she should go. I was only trying because I knew she was not going to release me so easily. If I was to go, she was to go with me, if only to make sure she knew where I stayed. My quick decision to go so soon after the news and my darkened face made her suspicious. She asked her husband to excuse her, and I wished him goodbye. We went on foot to my place. On the way, we talked a lot. At one point, she asked me, Jack, are you sure you are not the young man who has been described? Be frank with me. You know I cannot tell anyone. You know I cannot tell even my own mother. You ought to know me better than that. I am sure, Jack, you are concerned, and if you want to be frank with me, I'm going to search your room as soon as we arrive. I have known you too long to be wrong. I have never been in Westlands in my life, Connie, he lied. Believe me. Furthermore, why the hell should I do such a thing? For money, and you need it pretty badly. Have you forgotten our father's 600 shillings? If you can steal your father's, whose can't you? I'm very sure you are the one. But anyway, it won't be long before I know everything. As it turned out, she was straight. She was right. As it turned out, she was right. I liked her too much to prevent her from searching my house or doing whatever else she pleased. I offered her a share, but she would not take even a penny. I tried to convince her that it was not the money that was being talked about, but she was too clever for me. Anyway, if she's secretive as she used to be, there won't be any leakage, I told myself. I then told her how I wanted to furnish my home and other things I wanted to buy. She volunteered to help me buy them and reminded me to get a spare bed. As she was on maternity leave, we spent that and the following week buying furniture I needed and other necessary things. At the end of the second week, which was almost the end of the month, I was enjoying the art of my own hand. I had a sofa set, a carpet, new curtains, coffee tables, a wardrobe, a kitchen cupboard, a charcoal burner, a stove, a set of tea utensils, a radiogram, and a tape recorder. The last two I bought from a black market dealer. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. Connie kept on visiting me after our meeting, and I kept on seeing her at her home. I became her husband's friend. About 6 months after our meeting, Connie asked me if I would like to shift into another house that had 2 rooms, a bathroom, a toilet, and a kitchen. I was to add only 50 shillings per month over the rent I paid for my present single room in Makadara. I agreed with her, even before I knew where the apartment was. And when I realized later that it was in Wood Street initially, I was delighted. That was a very nice place for a man with my kind of a job, and I liked it better than any other place I stayed in Nairobi. A week later, I shifted to that place and arranged my house with Connie's help. She liked the place better than where she lived. She even suggested that I should get married because the house was large enough for 2. None of my friends knew where I stayed, and I intended never to let them know. If I let them know, the police would also know. Within 6 months after the Westlands job, I was completely broke. Most of the money had gone into the furniture I had bought and in the advance payment for rent from my former house in Makadara. I had spent the rest on wars, in nightclubs, and in cinemas. I woke up early one morning to go and see if Connie would spare me at least £1 before she went to school. At around 7, I knocked at the door of her house in the Woolworth Estate. She was awake and in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Her husband had slept out that night. There was a bed in the sitting room, which I was sure never stayed there, and in it was a person sleeping. The shoes on the floor told me the occupant was a female. I talked to Connie, and when the occupant of the bed heard my voice, she jumped up as if she had just realized a snake was lying beside her. It was my mother. I didn't know whether to cross over that short distance to her or to turn and run away. I only stayed where I was, my mouth semi-open. But she came straight to me and held me so tightly that I was afraid she'd break my lips. She seemed to think that I would just vanish and stay for many more years without seeing me. After some time, she managed to speak. "Oh, my lost son, bless the Lord for bringing you back to me safely. Why on earth did you have to run away from home and never once think of coming back? Can't you be at least kind to me? I have missed you dearly, and I'm glad to see you after all those years." As she said these words, tears were flowing from her eyes. I had gone there to be helped out of a financial trouble I was in, but instead, I was being wept over. And when Connie saw her mother weeping, she too started weeping. This earth is full of surprises. Now here was my mother. Fate had made me meet her while I had not a penny in my pocket. The last shilling I had was taken by the merciless Kenyan bus conductor for taking me from Wood Street to Uru Estate. I had bought 2 Sportman cigarettes with the 20 cents they had spared me. What a hell of coincidence. No, I must do something to wash away this shame. No matter what type of thing, but something, whatever the risk. Why hadn't she come when I had the 6,000 shillings? At least I would have given her 2,000 shillings to prove myself a gentleman. She wasn't a poor man, yes, but supposing she asked me to buy her a dress with the money I had been earning in those years I had been away from home. I asked myself all these questions as she talked to me. I did not even hear most of what she said. She was telling me things about Koma, how if I agreed to go home with her, everyone would be delighted. She made me promise that I would go home with her to see the rest of the family, and she added they would at least expect a share of what I had been earning. That alone made me almost run mad. I had not a penny on me, and I had agreed to go home with her. I knew without being told that going home empty-handed after such a period of time was antisocial. I left her after promising that I would take supper with them there. I went out, prepared for the worst that would befall me in my search for what I was to take home with me. I went around the whole town without good results. I did not even meet anyone I knew. Everything was against me, and I decided not to give myself more trouble, but to go and rest until tomorrow. I did not eat anybody's lunch that goddamn day. At about 5, it started raining heavily. I suddenly decided to go to New Rwathia to demand back 200 shillings a friend owed me. But it was all in vain. The best he could do was order 4 bottles of beer for me instead, and when I demanded cash, I couldn't get it. What a pity. A man is prepared to buy you as many bottles of beer as you can drink, but not the least prepared to give you half their cost in cash. I will never understand people. After the 4 bottles, I decided to go so as to get prepared for the supper I was to take with my mother at my sister's. The rain still fell heavily as I descended the stairs. Outside, I turned right, then crossed the road towards Nyanza Bar. The street lights were on as it was dark. At the corner of the road, I saw a car with brown mud on its body. I noticed it had Ugandan registration numbers. I noticed too that it had just been parked, as its body was still warm despite the heavy rain. I stood beside it and saw a canvas bag and a large suitcase in the back seat. Then on the driver's door, I saw a sticker that showed that the car belonged to a tourist club in Uganda. Whoever had parked it there was new in Kenya and probably searching for lodging, or had left it there unaware of how Nairobi operated. Thinking quickly, I took out a bunch of keys I used to use when breaking into cars. A criminal friend of mine had advised me to use keys to open a car instead of a screwdriver, which could force me to break into it. And I found it a sound idea. I tried all the keys I had and was about to despair when the last one opened it. I entered the car as if it belonged to me, and I was very calm. I took every deliberate step. First, I took the canvas bag and opened it. What I saw inside justified my action. The suitcase could not be broken into there and then, but its weight made it worth taking away. I then opened the dashboard compartment to see if I could get something to smoke as I carried my luggage. But what I saw there was almost made me stop dead. I opened the dashboard compartment to see if I could get something to smoke as I carried my luggage. But what I saw there almost made me stop dead. Kept as if for sure was a pistol. At first, I feared its sight and couldn't dare touch it. Then I remembered how we had used one of that type in Westlands, and with lightning speed, I took it and put it in the left outer pocket of my coat. It fitted as if the pocket was made to carry it. With the same speed, I shot out of the car and that place and found my way to River Road. As I put my luggage down, a route number 10 bus for Wood Street arrived. Within 10 minutes, I was opening the door of my 2-room apartment. I did not remember until the following morning that I had promised to have supper with my mother and my sister's place, and neither did I remember that I had not eaten the whole day. The contents I had found in the car had satisfied my whole body. In the canvas bag were books, novels, and some educational material. There was also an encyclopedia. All had the initials G.E. Maxwell Jr. Then I took out 2 pairs of binoculars, a very large camera, a carton which had about 40 pounds of ammunition. This made my heart increase its beating by an excess of 1 or 2. There was also a pouch that had a pair of sun goggles plus a lot of other things. The suitcase was the one that carried what I was in need of. After breaking into it, the first sight was that of a camera stand, what I knew would not have fitted in the canvas bag. Then I took out all the clothes one at a time. The owner of the suits I took out must have been as huge as Hercules. I tried to fit 1 pair of the trousers, but it sprawled on the floor, a length of 1.5 feet. As for the waist, it would have taken me another man of my size to make it hold a little. Anyway, the clothes did not matter much. I already had too many to care for more. At the bottom of the large suitcase is where I found what had made me risk my life. There were various envelopes, and I took one at a time and opened them. The first one had 10,000 shillings in Ugandan currency. The second one had some traveler checks, which turned out to be in great demands by Indians around town. The third and the fourth had nothing of importance, but the fifth one had a little over 4,000 shillings in Kenyan currency. That was what I was looking for, and truly speaking, as it was with my last envelope pick, my heart was beating a bit faster than usual. The following morning, I woke up early, and after preparing myself, I set off for Uhuru Estate. Everyone was awake and ready for breakfast, and I was welcome to it. I was pretty hungry, but of course I did not tell them so. I was not, under any circumstances, going to let my mother know that there were times when I slept without eating. Brother-in-law Kamau was nowhere to be seen, as he had gone to work. My sister Connie and mother were not going anywhere, as it was Saturday, a free day for teachers, so I was to be engaged the whole day. They told me I would go home with mother the following day, if only for a day. Then I told them to accompany me to town to help me buy presents for those I was going to find at home. I bought everything they asked me to, and a lot more for the children at home. Then when we were satisfied, we went back to Uhuru Estate. The following day, we took a Peugeot at Tirun, and in less than an hour, we were at Murang'a. I almost thought the town was deserted. The fact is that after staying in big towns, when you go to the small ones, you find a great change, and you might find yourself wondering how a decent person could agree to stay in such a tiny town. I hate to remember that when I was young, I once stayed awake the whole night after I'd been promised a visit to that very town. I hate to remember that when I was young, I once stayed awake the whole night after I'd been promised a visit to that very town. Within 20 minutes, I was being welcomed home. Things were very different from how I'd left them. The first surprise was that my family had shifted from our old home to another farm they had bought. That meant that if I had gone home alone, I would have had to ask where I belonged. The second surprise was that when I left, our shopping center had only one shop and one butchery. Now there were 4 shops, one butchery, an hotel, a bar, even a portion mill, each standing on its own ground. I looked quite a stranger around there, and people stared at me wherever I passed as if I was a zombie. That and the next day were nice. I enjoyed staying with my brothers and sisters, who were very glad to see me. But when they all went to school and left me with the maid and the laborers, I started getting tired and restless. On the third day, I guess they were surprised to find me gone without prior notice. Back in Nairobi, I got busy getting rid of the oversized clothes. Believe me or not, if I had known where to contact the owner, through the phone, I would have kept them somewhere and told him to collect them. I then changed the Ugandan currency to Kenyan shillings. But as I knew the dough was hot, I had to employ a go-between for a fat fee. The traveler's check were too hot, and they too needed a hard hand. Then something funny happened. One night, I took the canvas bag and the large suitcase to get rid of it. The clothes were not there, as I had already got rid of them. I had kept the camera for my son, but the stand was in the suitcase, plus other things I didn't want. I had taken a shortcut from Wood Street to Kariako through the Race Course Primary School, my idea being to abandon them between that school and Kariako. When I was about to abandon them, 3 people attacked me. They robbed me of everything, including 300 shillings, leaving me with only my underwear. They did not beat me as much, as I did not bother them. As I knew the routine, I did not report anywhere. But 2 days later, I saw with my own eyes 2 of the people being arrested at Kariako while trying to sell the suitcase and the canvas bag with the pairs of binoculars that I unintentionally left in the bag to a man I very well knew to be a CID officer always stationed at Kariako, posing as a buyer of black market items. Well, you can guess their charge without being told, and if you don't, then you don't follow me either. That CID officer and another one around there have put handcuffs on a lot of people, and I'm sure they will yet put more handcuffs on more people. The problem with me was that with all the cash I did not buy a thing I could live to remember. Instead, I spent it on beer from this bar to another, making sure that every prostitute looked my way. Within a short time, I was known almost everywhere beer was sold, and within the same period, the cops had come to know me by name. They also put me on their list of the wanted criminals, and that was one of the things I later came to regret. My sister Connie always asked me to look for a girl to stay with so that she could be saving me whatever I got, but I had never come across one that attracted me. One thing I wasn't going to do was to stay with a termagant. She'd have me arrested so as to get the house. I have known many to do that. Connie would introduce me to several of her girlfriends, but none attracted me. Some were teachers she had known, some were secretaries in various offices and the like, but I never felt like loving any of them, though I went around well with whoever she introduced me to. I would sometimes go home from town and find 2 or 3 girls waiting for me. I have been a referee on several showdowns with girls, and they met at my house and each claimed me for a husband. Then one day I got what I was really looking for. It was a Monday, and I took a friend to his home at Bahati after drinking with him in the evening. When we arrived there, I felt that I couldn't leave him alone, so we spent the night at his home. The following morning, we woke up early as my man was to report on duty at Standard Bank on Kimathi Street. The man left me behind, but I followed soon after. As I was going towards the nearest bus stop, instead of going all the way through Bahati Social Hall, I decided to take a shortcut between the 2 blocks to reach Heshima Road. At the end of the plot on the left, I noticed a thing that looked like a driving license on the ground. I picked it up and saw that it was a student's bus pass supplied by Kenyan Bus Services to pupils who went to school away from their homes. Inside it, I saw a photo of a girl which made my heartbeat exceed by 1 or 2. For no reason at all, I felt I liked the owner of the photo. She was a student at Shada High School, and I saw that she was doing her final year in the school. The name was Miriam Nyamboi. I had nothing else to do that day but to go and booze, so I decided I would go and take the bus pass to her, not forgetting to introduce myself. At about 12:15 that day, I was standing at the gate of Shada High School waiting for the girls to pass by me so that I could pick her out, and if she consented, take her out for lunch. Anyway, at last this girl came in a group often. I called her. She almost ignored me, but then she thought the better of it. The others did not stop, and I liked it, for I wouldn't have liked them to see how contemptuously this girl was looking at me. I almost decided to talk to her, but then I took out the pass and showed it to her. She smiled for the first time. Thanks so much. Where did you pick it? I knew I dropped it somewhere, but I only realized it in the bus and I couldn't go back. I guess it would be better idea if you ask me to introduce myself. Suppose a friend of yours comes. What name would you give her? Or would you admit that you are talking so happily to a stranger? Sorry. I was so overjoyed. I am Millie, as you can see in this pass. And I am Jack Zolo, working with Hughes Limited. And to what tribe does that surname of yours belong, I wonder? I'm a typical Kikuyu. By the way, I could buy you lunch if you do not mind. Thank you, I don't mind. So we went out for lunch. One thing I've just forgotten to tell you is that when I saw this girl, I realized the photo had not contained her all beauty. She was the most attractive girl in all the groups that I had set my eyes on that day. She was about 17 with bright, intelligent eyes and a structure that matched her 5'4". When she smiled, it was then that she showed her all beauty. I liked the way she spoke in English and the way she stole glances at me when I was not looking at her. On the way to the hotel, I felt for sure that I had last met my Helen of Troy. This girl looked feminine. After lunch, I escorted her back to the school and I went my way. She had told me where she lived and we promised to meet near Bahati Social Hall, where she always went for evening classes. She did typing in her free time. Days passed and I went to see her now and then until we became very intimate friends. She lived with her mother in the Shima Road in Bahati, opposite to Morrison Primary. Her mother, Salome Wangari, had rented a room for her and her two young sisters, and the 2 rooms for herself. One room she used for selling unlicensed beer. A very nice woman Salome was, but if you wanted to know that she carried a Somali knife, all you had to do was to pretend to be very intoxicated and on your way out, go in the direction where her daughter slept. If you did not get a stab in the back, she admired you, but at least you'd have found yourself getting up from the ground where she would have thrown you. This woman knew me, and I believed she liked me as I used to spend a lot of time at her place. But whenever I went out of her room, she would make sure of the direction I'd taken. One day she caught me red-handed outside the door of her daughter's room and received a stern warning. The Somali knife held tightly in her left hand. I think I got away with it because of my age. The year passed and Millie sat for her Cambridge School certificate. She passed in Division 2 and started working with East African Airways at Embakasi. When she got this job with the EAAA, I got better chances of seeing her. I would call her and request her to have lunch with me, and she never turned down my request. On the days she was off duty, I would also take her out of Nairobi to other towns she had not visited, but she wouldn't agree to sleep out. Her beauty and good behavior encouraged me to stick to her and to do away with those who were craving to own me for themselves. She always said that if it had not been for her mother, she would not be what she was, and she believed she owned her mother everything. She used to say, if I don't do whatever my mother advises me to, God himself will punish me. Well, I couldn't blame her. If she believes in superstitions, I thought, let her do so. If you really feel you want me, talk with my mother as a gentleman. Her biggest fear is possibility that we could lead the same type of life she has gone through, she told me one day. But approaching a woman like Millie's mother on such a topic was one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life. First, I wrote her a letter asking her to allow us to wed, but I realized she could not read, so I tore it up. Then an article I had read someplace came to my mind. It said, "Our doubts are our traitors and make us lose the gain we often might win by fearing to attempt." So one day I went to see her about the matter, hoping for the best and prepared for the worst. We were alone in the room. Where she sold beer. I tried to bring up the matter, then realized that I could not confront her with the issue. Even after taking 4 bottles of beer, I could not do it, though I'd expected to after being a bit tipsy. When I left, I decided I must get an experienced person to do it for me. I was then sure that I could not do it on my own. That same day, I went straight to see Joseph Mwangi, a friend of mine who worked with the government printing press. He was a bit older than me, married with 2 children. One of them had been born the same month of his wedding at home in Murana. His family and mine were very intimate. I gave him my story, and the next day we went to see Miriam's mother. There was no other customer, and when we took our seats, we asked for beers for us and for her. When we had taken 3 bottles of beer each, my friend talked to me. "Mom, there's something bothering us, and we feel that we ought to ask you. Will you please allow us?" "What is it, young man? Feel free and ask me." "This young man here, I guess you know him, as he tells me he comes here for drinks now and then. The only new person to you is myself, and my name is Joseph Mwangi. Now, together with his coming to take drinks here, he has had a question to ask you, but as he tells me, he has found it hard to ask you personally, and so asked me to ask on his behalf. In fact, as you know, according to our tradition, he is very right. To make it short, the request is you want to get married to your daughter Miriam. We would be very grateful if you personally gave us your answer to the request." Tipsy as I was becoming, I could not bring myself to face her wholly, but through the corners of my eyes. I did not fail to notice that her smiling face had darkened soon after the question was asked. She kept quiet, and we thought we would hate our presence. She kept quiet, and we thought she would hate our presence for life. It was after about 7 minutes that she decided to talk. But as she was about to say something, there was a knock at the door, and she opened it to admit 2 smartly dressed men. As they took their seats, she turned to us and asked us to follow her. Once outside, I was very surprised to see her leading us to the room where her daughter stayed. If all I knew of her was true, and I am sure as it was, we were the first men to be allowed to enter that room. No one was there as the children were out and Millie was at work. When we were seated, she told us she would not be long, and she went out, closing the door behind. About 3 minutes later, she came back carrying 10 bottles of beer. She told us of all these men in Miriam's father. One of those men is Miriam's father, the one with the bald head, if you noticed. I'll not forget your request, and I'll give you an answer before you leave. It needs some thinking, and I must, of course, know what Miriam thinks about it. I guess you must have talked before you decided to see me. She's about to come, and if you need more beer, just send her. Feel all right here, young man. At the door, she turned and told us that she would see us before we left. An hour later, Millie came, followed by her younger sisters. They all knew me. I introduced them to my friend. Millie was surprised to find us in her room, as she knew how strict her mother was about it. But then she realized it was her mother who had brought us there, and she was overjoyed. We then sent her for more beer to make her mother remember that we were still around, for she seemed to have forgotten us. Our trick worked. About 5 minutes later, she came and called Mwangi outside. Millie got suspicious and wanted to know what was going on, but I told her. But What I told her satisfied her. 30 minutes later, Mwangi came in, and the sight of him made my heart beat faster than usual. I could judge from the look of his face that whatever they had talked about had not satisfied him. An hour later, when we decided to go, he told me that things were not very bad on my side, and that she was not as harsh as he had imagined. That was how far things went. Neither no, neither nor yes. I did not for some time take further action, but one day I thought I should see her again. I had found Millie's place of work, and I had been told that she had not reported for duty. It was around 4 when I arrived at their place in Bahati. When I knocked at her mother's door, the only sound I got was something like a groan. I thought she had a man in bed, so I decided to go to her daughter's room and wait. But even there, no one answered. I tried the door and it gave way instantly. The picture that I saw will never run away from my mind. Millie's 2 sisters lying on the floor. Millie herself sat on a dining chair, her head resting on the table. I knew straight away that something was wrong. First, I went to her, and when I pushed her a little, she managed to open her eyes and try to speak, but she could not. Her hands were on her stomach. The maid was nowhere to be seen. I bent down to look at the 2 girls, and I noticed that Millie had vomited on the floor under the table. I at once thought of calling an ambulance and went out. Within a minute, I was on the phone calling the police. I told the man at the other end to send an ambulance around Bahati Social Home. I told him that they would meet me there. I would take them to where the people lay unconscious. So far, I had not seen Millie's mother, but I guessed the groaning I heard was caused by pain. To my surprise, within less than 2 minutes, I had a siren of an ambulance followed by a police 999 call. I waved to the driver, who followed me a short distance to where the patients were. The mother was lying on the sofa and had also vomited. I had a nurse say that it must be food poisoning, and as it turned out, she was right. They were all taken to Kenyatta National Hospital, and I was left in charge of their rooms. The hospital report said that they had been poisoned with food. I was told that had I delayed for more than 30 minutes, they would have all been dead. The maid was arrested 3 months later, but as she was a young person, she was only put under probation for a period of time. Millie was the first person to recover. She left the hospital after a month, looking very thin. Then the 2 young girls followed her. When at last the mother came out, she did not even wait to know whether I had done any arrangements about wanting to have a daughter. She was so happy with me for saving their lives that she consented to my living with Millie if I wanted to, and prepare the rest later. All the same, I did not go with her then, but some months later she came to stay with me in Wood Street. The trouble with her was that as long as we lived together, she never forgot that day. I really enjoyed living with that girl. She was one of the rare type in any country. Life in my apartment in Wood Street soon after Miriam shifted and changed. Everything was rearranged. The kitchen, for one, came to a constant use. The sofas got covers. I never again took my clothes to dry cleaners except the suits. I felt as if I was married. Having the right girl in your apartment is about the most tremendous experience a man can know. Since that time, I was never without a packet of cigarettes. Chapter 4. I don't remember well how long I stayed before pulling another job, but I know that for a time after Millie shifted to my place, I did not. I was therefore feeling unhappy for not having bought her at least a present since she came in. While at her mother's place in Bahati, I'd done a lot for her, but that did not count in my heart. I had a gun now, but not the least of my knowledge on how to use it. But I'd studied it for a long time and I could now manage to load and unload it. Millie did not know I owned one, but she had accidentally come across rounds of ammunition I had put in my suitcase. Fortunately, she did not know what they were. Early one morning, I woke up just as a vehicle from EAA was hooting outside our apartment for Millie. My aim was to go and see Gidinji George, alias Gigi, who owned a second-hand clothes shop at Kariakor. I'd met him at the Central Police Station while I was under arrest for fighting in a public place. He had been arrested as a suspect in a certain bank raid, but when a police informer gave the names of the right people who had pulled the job, Gigi was set free. He had sent me to his place of work when I left him at the police station, and I had helped to have his advocate know he was arrested. So after that, we had become friends. As I lighted from the bus, I saw him entering a car. I crossed Racecourse Road in a hurry and was just in time to stop him. When he saw me, he opened the car door for me and I entered. He told me he was off to see a friend in Thika, and if I did not mind, I would accompany him. So we both set off for Thika. On the way, we talked a lot. He borrowed that car from a friend to go and see another friend for some business. He told me there was a European who owned a big farm 50 miles from Thika, and he used to draw money from the bank each end of the month. He wanted to get information on the man so that he could stage a hold-up a few days later. There were only 4 days to the end of the month. At Thika, we found the man from Mongoba. After 15 minutes, the three of us were seated in a private room. He told us that the white man drove a Peugeot 404. He gave his laborers their wages on the dot, that at the end of the month, he drew the money 24 hours before. Does he carry a gun? Gigi asked. Not at all. I am sure of that. I would have noticed it within 3 years I have served him, Kariakor replied. You can stage the robbery at the bank as he leaves or attack him on the way. Better leave that to us. Your part is only to keep us informed. He told me that he phones some hours to warn you that he's coming. Yes, he does it these days. That is since he became my permanent customer. He's a very nice sort of a character, but looks somehow tough. Forget about his being tough. We have met tough guys who'd never part with their cash easily, but we always have a method of persuading them. Where exactly did you say his farm is? About 10 miles from the roundabout towards Nairobi. You'll find a mud road on the left. The mud road runs for 10 miles right to the gate of his farm. From here, he drives straight home and phones back to let us know he has arrived safely. I have never known him to change his route all the years I have served him. How does he carry the money? I mean, does he use a bag or a box or many bags? He carries the whole lot in one bag, a large handbag. I hope that is about all. You will excuse me now as I must report back. You have only 3 days now if you are planning to pull the job this month. I'll depend on you, Gigi, to bring me my share if all goes well. Well, we wish you good luck, I told him as he prepared to go. You are the ones who need it, he told us, and went away. I was feeling so happy that I could not get any words to thank Gigi. I had left my home early to see him precisely for such an idea, and to my good luck, which was also someone else's bad luck, I found him with the same idea. Left Mongoba, we drove towards Nairobi, and from the roundabout we found our way towards the farm. After 10 miles, we reached the mud road and we took it. We drove at a slow speed until we reached the gate. We learned that this particular farm belonged to another person. His farm was about 5 miles from the point, and so we started off again. We were glad to find that the rough road was used by different farms. The man would not be very suspicious to find another car on the same road. The road runs through coffee plantations. It was a narrow road and it would be difficult to overtake a car ahead of you. The coffee plantations were so close to the road that it would be easy to ambush the car from both sides. Minutes later, we reached the gate to his farm and investigated the area. We could not stage the robbery there, so we dismissed that area. The mud road still went on, and we followed it a short distance where we came to the workers' quarters. Satisfied that we could not take that route after committing the crime, we turned our car and went back. On the way back, between the two farms, we saw some bumps we had early passed without noticing and stopped. On either side of the road were short cement posts indicating that there were culverts underneath. A wire fence divided by the two farms. There was also an uncultivated portion. It was a nice place in which to stage the robbery, since on either side there was a little bush on which to hide. On the way back to Nairobi, we discussed how we would pull the job. We had only 3 days and there were many things to be done. I had a gun, but Gigi did not know. I did not tell him because I knew if I did, he would be reluctant to look for another. We had to get a car. By that, I mean we had to steal one. We had to find 2 other people to join us. But that we regarded as simple. We needed a competent driver though. Then we would need a day in which to show our driver and the other man the road and the stage of the crime. Back in Kariako, Gigi parked the car. But before we got out, he asked me whether I had a particular person in mind who could join us, and I told him I had one. He then asked me if I could borrow a gun, and as I knew that this meant another share, I agreed to try my best, not forgetting to tell him to try too in case I failed. I did not want him to know I owned one, but he came to know some months later. It was on a Tuesday, and we were to pull the job on Saturday. We decided to meet the following day at his place of work to work out the details. Back in my apartment, I took out my gun and loaded it. It carried 14 rounds. It now felt heavy. I had never used a gun before, but by the way I had seen it handled in films and by some other people I knew, I felt for sure that I could use it. I am not the type to stay with a thing and fail to know how it is used. I even learned how to dismantle it and to fix it back without anybody's instruction. I unloaded it again and put it in the box. There were still 3 days to go, and hence no need to panic. The following day at 11, I was at Gigi's shop. He was not there, but I had left a message that I should meet him at Jamie Burr at lunch. As I had an hour or so to myself, I decided to contact the man I had promised Gidenji that he would join us. He worked at New Rwathi, and so it was difficult to get him. He had been a driver with Kenya Bus Services for a period of time. He had been sacked for carelessness driving, but to me, he was the most competent driver I knew. He had been a getaway driver in various robberies, and many on the other side of the law knew him. About 11:30, I was sitting with him in a private room discussing the matter. His name was Joseph Thuku Kagwashi, but we knew him in short as Kagwashi. After giving him the layout, I asked him to accompany me to Jamimba to meet the rest of the boys. We saw Gidenji as he was descending the stairs, and together we went to a private room in the bar. He introduced us to Laban Command, the international car thief. I needed not to introduce my name as he was known. I needed not to introduce my man as he was known by all of them. So we sat down to talk business. Kamande was a new person to me, and I was surprised to hear that he knew about me. In a borrowed car, we went to the scene of the intended robbery, and after we were all satisfied, we drove back. We decided that Kagwashi and Kamande should steal the getaway car, while Gidenji and I would do all we could to secure at least one gun, which was regarded as the best tool in such an operation. The following day, we went at around 3 o'clock in the same bar. Kagwashi and Kamande had secured a car, Cortina 1600 GT. Gidenji had not yet got a gun, but he had promised one early the following day. On my side, I had been told to go for one I was borrowing at the same evening. We all agreed two guns were better than one. After settling all that, we decided to hold a final meeting on 29th December at around 6 in the evening. We agreed that we should all sleep around the same place so that when the time came, there could not be delay. That day we parted late, and as I boarded a bus for Wood Street, I felt uneasy. That night, Millie had a lot of questions to ask me, but I did not. That night, Millie had a lot of questions to ask me, but I did all I could to evade them. Christmas was approaching. She had a lot of plans for it, but had no penny in my pocket. If we succeeded, her dreams will come true, but if we bungle it, that will be the end of me, I told myself. By now, she had known for sure that I was not employed by Hughes, but she did not know that I was a criminal. She had believed I had some business somewhere, but was reluctant to let her know. That night, though, I did not bother her. She did not know that I did not sleep. My mind was occupied on how I would use my gun for the first time, and the amount I would get after pulling the job and getting away with it. In the morning, after she had gone to work, I managed to snatch a little sleep. I woke up at about 1 o'clock feeling tired and very hungry. I went to the bathroom, took a bath, and after selecting a suit and dressing, I took 20 shillings note that I found on the table and went to the nearest hotel for lunch. Back at home, I felt better. I took out the gun and some rounds of ammunition and put them in my pockets. There were 4 hours before our meeting, and I needed something to keep me busy and to stop me from trembling. The weight of the gun and the ammunition in my pockets made me sweat. Not that they were heavy, but because of the sentence their possession alone carried. If I can sweat in my own room with nobody around simply because of carrying a gun, what will happen when I go among people? I asked myself. I prayed that I would not meet cops wherever I went, or I would get so scared that I would give myself away. I was reading a newspaper when Millie knocked at the door. I heard a car stop outside, but I had not realized it was Millie who was being dropped. The knocking almost made me jump out of my skin. It was the cop's style of knocking, and it forced me to warn her against knocking in such a manner. I could see she was very surprised to see my fright, and I looked away. When something is slightly wrong with you, be sure that your wife will notice it immediately. I tried to cheer her up after realizing my mistake in order to make her less suspicious, but it was useless. At 5:30, I told her I was going out to town and I might not come back as we had a meeting in Thika. She went with me as far as the bus stage, and as I boarded the bus, she wished me good luck as she knew I needed it. At Jamiba, I found the rest of the boys waiting for me. They were all ready with everything. They were drinking beer and they ordered a bottle for me. I really felt I needed one if I was to stop shivering and sweating at the same time. I ordered a brandy to see if it would make me a little braver, and it worked wonders. Then we decided to go. And spend the rest of the night in Thika. So we went to where Kagwashi had hidden the stolen car, and we set off for Thika. We parked the car at the back of 12th December Hotel. We decided it was advisable not to go around in a group of 4. We decided to split in twos until the following morning when we would meet at the same place. Gigi went with Gashwi and Kamande with me. I had no money, and so before we parted, I asked Gigi for some, and he gave me 100 shillings, which was to be refunded immediately I got my share. There was a dance that night at Thika Social Hall, and we went there. Before long, Kamande told me he did not feel safe there, and we left immediately. I tried to take him from this place to that as I knew Thika inside out, but nor did he find rest. It was so uneasy that I felt very brave in comparison. At last, he decided we should sleep, and I took him to Kirimambogo bar where I had earlier booked a double room. I was a little drunk, and after undressing and placing the unloaded gun under the pillow, I immediately fell asleep. I woke up several times in the night after dreaming the police were knocking at the door, and each time I found Kamande sitting on his bed, covering his face with his hands, as if supporting it from falling down, or as if praying. That whole night Kamande did not sleep, and as we took breakfast, he confessed to me he felt pretty bad. Outside Kilimambogo, I bought a Daily Nation newspaper, and after briefly glancing at the headline, I folded it and went to the place we had parked the car. The driver was there, but Gigi was not. He told us Gigi was waiting for us inside the hotel. We found him in a corner reading a newspaper. There was nobody near. There, so we went over the final details. After making sure the white man arrived in the bank with his bag, we would give him about 15 minutes. Then we would start off ahead of him. We would go to the place he had selected and wait for him. Our car would be a few yards from the bumps, facing the direction we had come from. Gigi, wearing a mechanical overall, would pretend to be working on the car's engine, so the bonnet would be open. He would be carrying his gun. Kagwashi, the driver, would be in the car pretending to be the stranded owner of the car. Kamande and I would be on either side of the road in the bush, and we would come out as soon as we learned we had a gunshot. We would force the white man to hand over the bag, and once in possession, we would all go into the car. I was to carry the bag, and Kamande was to take the key of the white man's car, so that when we left, it would take him some time before he reached a phone or anything. By the time we would be miles away. At about 9, we took positions outside the bank, and at 10, the car arrived, and a huge figure with a long mustache came out after parking. He looked tough, all right. After 15 minutes, we entered our car and set off towards his farm. We passed the scene we had selected for the setup to a place where the road was a little wider, and turned our car. Back at the scene, we got out, and after final instruction, we took our positions. Kamande went to the left, and I got to the right. Kamande went to the left, and I to the right. Gigi put on an overall and opened the bonnet. He then went into the boot and took out a jacket, lifted the car in such a way that you would have noticed it at a distance, and got busy working on it. The driver was inside, hidden by the bonnet, so no one could see him from afar. I lit a cigarette, and as I smoked, I took my gun and loaded it. I was trembling, and I hated myself for it. But when I thought of Kamande, I felt braver. We waited for a considerable time. 2 cars passed, one from the farms and the other from town, but none of the people in both cars took any interest in us. At about 11:30, the car appeared. I could see it clearly from my position. I could also see Gidenji busy working on the car. A little distance away, the white man stopped and put out his head through the window as if he was suspicious. He then seemed to think Gigi was harmless, and at a slow speed he approached the truck. As the front wheel of the car left the bump, Gideji turned around, a gun in his hand. As the front wheels of the car left the bumps, Gideji turned around, a gun in his hand. As soon as I heard the gunshot, I jumped out of my position towards the car as a cat leaping towards a rat. The windscreen of the 404 broke into pieces. The white man's hands were in the air, his eyes wide open. He asked us not to shoot him, but to take the whole cash. I took the money from the back seat and then turned to go into our car just a few yards away. Kamande had not taken the key of the car, and as we passed the car, he suddenly remembered and Gigi asked our driver to stop. The driver stopped some yards from the white man's car, and Kamande, a sim in his hand, went back to the white man who was still stranded in the car. Too shocked to do anything. Suddenly we heard a gunshot that we had not expected, followed by a terrible cry from Kamande, and the roar of the car started. I acted in a way I never thought I would. Before Kamande fell to the ground, I was out of the car, my gun in the hand. I shot 2 consecutive shots at the white man's car, and the only result I got were the sound of the rear glass splintering to pieces. It was my first time to use the gun, and I nearly dropped it because of the loud sound. It was louder than the white man's or the Gigi's. As the car disappeared, I went to Kamande, who was trying to stand up in pain. He had a bullet hole in the center of his chest. I have never felt so angry in my life. And had I caught up with that white man, I would have shot him at exactly the same point he had shot Kamande. And I am glad right now that I did not reach him. All this happened in less than 40 seconds. As I helped him up, Gidenji came to aid me, and we laid him on the rear seat of the car. As we did so, Kagwashi turned and in a soft voice in English said, "Let the dead bury the dead. One of these days he was going to die." Before I realized what I was doing, the pistol I carried was in my hand, pointing and pressing its mouth against my chest, and with a voice I could not have recognized as my own. I told him, "Listen, old one, before you open that stinking mouth of yours to hear, think twice, be sure of what you want to say. Right now, I'll feel content to shoot that stinking breath. Right now, I'll feel content to shoot that stinking breath out of you. Can you explain why he was to die one of these days?" I have known myself to lose my temper several times, but never to what extent. Right then, I felt like pulling the trigger. Gidenji exclaimed, "Sweet Jesus, what are you two doing? The white man will have reached the corpse through the phone by the time we leave here. Relax, young boy. What has Kagwishi's word to do with Kamande's death?" I put the gun back, and in the second, we were busy on the road. I never forgot that driver's word ever since in the 2 months that followed. Had I done something to make him sorry that same day, I would have felt a little bit contented. I must have been born of an unforgiving disposition. They say that to forgive is a wrong, is the best revenge, but then you shouldn't believe all you hear. They say that to forgive a wrong is the best revenge, but then you shouldn't believe all that you hear. Before we reached Kahawa, Kamande was dead. We did not get any trouble on the way. After reaching Nairobi, we left the car with Kamande's body in it, and we went away. What else could we have done? We did not know where he came from. We did not know his people, and we did not know where he hung around. I, for one, did not know anything about him except what he had told me the day before his death. Gidenji knew Kamande's prostitutes, but going to tell her that Kamande had been killed would mean asking for a hell of a lot of problems. We went to Gidenji's apartment in Jericho, and locking ourselves inside, we got busy counting our take. It was the second time in my life to see so much money. It was twice as much as I had expected. Had I known Kamande's parent, I swear I would have taken this share to them. As it was, I had no idea, and I was not about to go out investigating, as I knew it would raise too many suspicions. After I took my share, including the gun share, I left Gidenji's well-furnished apartment, my pockets bulging with 21,000 shillings. Some I put inside of my shirt and pushed it to the back. As I left the room, Gidenji called me. "Zolo." "Yes, mister," I said. "When things are as they are now, one is better off with his mouth shut, keep cool until the heat is over. I thought you knew me better than that. If troubles come, it will have been caused by either of you, but not my General Zolo. I can assure you that all the time. So long, he said as I closed the door behind him. Opposite the Jericho Hall, I took a bus for town, and at River Road, I took another for Wood Street. Every minute I was in town seemed an untouched hour to me. I kept on feeling a finger of suspicion pointing at me. But whenever I turned, there was not a single soul behind me. After a few minutes, I was back in my apartment, 21,000 shillings richer. Brother, to get money is tough, but to spend it is quite another story. Robbery is very risky. Drinking the whole day, and doing other big things immediately after you get cash is another risk. But most criminals don't realize it and never will. I spent my 21,000 shillings in that manner, and truly speaking, I never once uttered a word concerning the crime we had committed, and yet in 2 or 3 weeks' time, the cops were looking for me day and night in connection with the crime. Kagwashi was already in remand waiting the trial. Millie was not at home, though I had not expected her to be, as she never came for lunch. I took out the gun and the money and arranged it in my suitcase. No one knew where I stayed, so I was the least worried that someone would surprise me. The sight of all that money in my suitcase almost made me crazy. In the evening, I heard that EAA car stop at the back of our apartment, and I drew the curtains a little fraction. I saw Millie accompanied by another girl. What an odd day to bring home a visitor, I asked myself. She later introduced me to the girl as Miss Mary Mwangi, her former classmate, and also working with EAM. She was to spend the night there, as they had other arrangements for Sunday. To me, that night was one of the dullest for years. I did not talk much, as they were engrossed in their Sunday arrangements, and to my surprise, I was at the center of their plans. In one place, I was to pose as a husband of one and a brother of the other. Women, you never know them. Anyway, they made me to do it. There are times it pays to pose, and other times when it does not. But that time, according to the girls, it paid surprisingly well. They needed my presence at Jericho Clinic. Well, to make a long story short, out of the 21 grand I had, I remained to remember only 5,000 shillings. I gave some to Millie to put in her account at the Bank of Baroda, which was to be robbed the following day. But after she had already received her receipt, the amount I paid for 1 year's house rent, 2,000 shillings I spent home, and the amount I spent on fittings for Millie and myself. As for where the rest went, I guess East Africa Breweries would explain better. Where they take the people's money, no one can tell but themselves. Rumors were flying from this to that corner of the town that we had shot Kamandi so as to get his share. Whoever told them we were the ones in the job, I did not know for sure, but had a rough idea that it was probably Kamandi's girlfriend, who of course knew Githinji and what he did for a living. The town was too hot for me, and I avoided it as much as possible. And for a month, when it became hotter than iron, I ran out of Nairobi and came back only when my gains had started dwindling. Months passed since pulling off that job without my thinking of another big job. I was still with Millie, and the more I stayed with her, the more I loved her. There surely must have been something she did to me to make me love her to that extent. Mitishamba, for instance. Or am I becoming a bit superstitious? And in all those years, she never conceived, and I didn't like it. This clinic she had been visiting every now and then had something to do with it. I had enough money from the small jobs I'd been pulling off almost every 2 months as I waited for the town to cool. Time passed as it cooled. I forgot that I was among the most wanted criminals in Nairobi. I would go out to town now, then meeting my old friends who were now almost forgotten. There was one important thing that I learned at that time about forgetting. The sooner you forget a wrong you did in the past, the sooner you'll do it again. This time, because of forgetting that I was wanted, I got what was ahead of me. End of chapter 4.
Hello guys, welcome to Gusii Digital Media, the platform that brings you the latest updates as they happen in a digital way. Subscribe to our YouTube channel because the future is digital.